All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming to my talk this afternoon. I know there were some pretty cool open sessions, but we get to go on a journey. The journey is SLO Creation and You, or how we learn to stop worrying and love the queue length. Oops. So a little bit about me. I work in Toronto. I've been doing Linux administration there for about 10 years. In the last 3 years, I've been working for FreshBooks doing more Linux administration work. Prior to the Linux administration, I did Ruby and Rails programming for about 3 years. But that's enough about me. Onward. Our story is set at FreshBooks, which is a cloud accounting platform built to help small business owners run their service-based businesses. They asked me to say that, but it's true. So let's introduce our cast of characters for our story. First up, we have service-level objectives, or SLOs. They're used to set formal expectations for your services stakeholders, or in other ways, a nice way to say we aim to provide this level of service. Almost in the same breath is the implication that the services owners are going to take the steps needed to restore service to that level in the event that there's been a breach of the objective. Now, that's like a 20-second, if that, kind of high-level view of what service-level objectives are. Please know that the topic is way deeper than that, and we'll get to that later. Related to SLOs are service-level agreements, or SLAs. SLA violations usually involve lawyers and paying people money. We're not going to talk about them because I am definitely not a lawyer. Next up, we have RabbitMQ. RabbitMQ is a messaging queuing software that forms an important piece of our tech stack at FreshBooks. We use it to do asynchronous message processing so that our real-time applications that our customers are interacting with and our microservices don't have to do that work in real time. Each service usually has its own queue that it can use on its own. Some examples of these asynchronous tasks include sending sign-up emails to new customers, provisioning billing profiles with our billing partners, and some data analytic tasks. RabbitMQ is going to serve as the backdrop for our story. Next is service ownership. Now, our vision of service ownership is still in flux at this point, but we envision it as people being responsible for the services that they wrote. What people? Oh, service owners. Service owners are going to be our final players in our story. They're the people or teams that are going to be responsible for the services that they have written. In Agile, those might be product owners, for example. Those service owners are going to be empowered to create SLOs and direct work with those services so that we can improve the service or redirect work to improve the SLO or improve service back to the objective. So we have our cast of characters. Let's dive in. Act 1, we made an SLO. FreshBooks is just starting on a journey towards service ownership, where individual teams are going to own their own services instead of operations, me, having de facto responsibility for making sure that everything in production runs smoothly. Now, it's still an aspiration at this point, but we want to get to a place where each service has a team and an owner that is creating these objectives and is responsible for the well-being of those services. In order to support these new service owners in the creation of these new objectives, my team started a pilot program using the RabbitMQ service to create our very first objective and go down the path of how does this work. But since we're not working in a vacuum, we wanted to go to our customers, that is our peers inside FreshBooks who are using Rabbit, to see if the things that we came up with made sense. Now, we're all new at this, and we figured more feedback is more good. So let's take a look at our very first objective and see how it went. 99.95% monthly availability is measured by new software we're going to write. We were really excited because this is pretty cool stuff if you're a nerd like me. And along with this, we even had some new recovery objectives to share too, for the first time ever. For the people who are wondering what available means here, don't worry about it. It's not really a major character, so we're going to skip its backstory like every 3rd to 8 writers do. Now, it was going to be a pretty big shock to our customers that we weren't intending to have any kind of objectives around queue length or the number of consumers that are listening to the queue or attached to it, or bound if you're a Rabbit nerd. That's kind of a departure from our historic monitoring, which we'll talk about later. So we thought it was best to be upfront about that, so no one's surprised later on when we ship the stuff and they go, hey, wait, what? The reason we left them out is because we didn't see queue length or consumer count as being really informative to the health of RabbitMQ, because remember, we're talking about RabbitMQ. So what was the reaction? We think you should have queue length as an SLO. Oh, OK, cool. Well, all right, Act 2, all about the queue length. Now, it's OK to have a discussion around this kind of expectation mismatch. And to be honest, I kind of expected it. Queue length at FreshBooks has historically been used to infer the health of RabbitMQ, since there's been a correlation between long queues and poor customer experience. But there's a number of reasons why a queue might have a bunch of messages in it. Maybe there just isn't enough consumer capacity to keep up, and it's causing a backlog. This is Toronto. I tried to pull in as many Toronto, Ontario, Canada images into the slides as I could, so if you can spot this place, kudos. The second reason, maybe there was an unexpected usage spike that was just going to clear itself without any human interaction. Like, why page someone if it, like, you wait and it's just going to fix itself? Another reason, maybe someone shipped a bug. Not that developers would ever do this. It's always a bug, never the bug. And maybe this bug caused our producers or consumers to misbehave, and the queues get long. Maybe the queue length is just growing with our business, and it's time for people to just do a capacity planning cycle. That's a good problem to have, right? Why page someone? Or maybe there's actually a problem with RabbitMQ. As you can see here, it does happen from time to time, and it will happen again in the future. In fact, we say to expect a small percentage of RabbitMQ unavailability right up front. Now, it looked to me like alerting on the queue length wasn't really ideal because there's a lot of ways for queues to grow. This doesn't mean our developers and new service owners didn't get value out of looking at the queue length. But what do our colleagues see that we don't? Let's have a look at a few. Well, it lets us know if we might not have enough consumer capacity. That's a very reasonable concern, right? It lets us know if we might have a problem with the workers. Maybe they can't publish or consume messages. Yeah, another thing you definitely want to know. It lets us know that RabbitMQ is well provisioned. Well, after we dug into this one a little deeper, we learned that they wanted to make sure that we weren't going to cheap out on hardware and under-provision RabbitMQ. The direct quote is, we want to make sure you're not going to run it on a Raspberry Pi, which actually gave me an idea. Because you go to business, look, I can save you a ton of money. But it's actually a really good point, isn't it? Like, how can we assure our RabbitMQ users that we're going to enqueue their messages quickly enough so that their publishing services aren't, waiting forever for Rabbit to say, got it. And how can we actually give them durability assurances too? Now, when you take a step back and you look, what they were really asking is, how quickly are you going to take my message so I can later consume it? And with this dialogue, we made another SLO around the message queuing latency and instrumented our new software to measure it. Now, let's get back to some of their other concerns. I think we can come up with more direct ways to address them if we guide those service owners into asking some questions about their services. Act 3, asking questions. See, our new service owners had some questions that they didn't know how to answer and were relying on a high-noise way to get some inferences. Now, a focus shift is required from getting there. A focus shift is required, and we're getting there by asking questions centered around the key business needs. And I think if we can answer these other questions, I'm confident we're all going to see eye to eye and agree that minimizing queues and length shouldn't be a service objective for me, the RabbitMQ service owner. Now, I think there's going to be a natural pushback to coming around to this new way of working. Spoiler alert, there was a pushback. And it's up to us, me, to sell this new way. Remember, the queue length, these alerts raised the flag that something was wrong. And for some people, that was enough. But why do we have to do all this extra work? What do we gain? Well, wouldn't it be nice if the page more directly indicated what was wrong? Like, hey, you might want to know that over the past hour, customers have been waiting an extra 5 minutes for emails. OK, cool. This call to action can prompt a more focused investigation. Why have customers waiting an extra 5 minutes longer? And I think if we move the focus to a small set of objectives, that means we already have, by definition, this small set of concerns that are the definitive things that we care about. And so since we're already going to be measuring to make sure we're hitting these objectives, we can use that same data that we're collecting to forecasts. We get capacity planning almost for free. If we see an upward trend, hey, we can actually forecast and predict in 6 months we're going to need more capacity. Isn't that great? I think that's great. And there's another couple gains. If we socialize our objectives inside FreshBooks, we're setting the expectation to management and to our peers that we're going to do what it takes to ensure that we're able to meet the objectives that we've all agreed to. Now, that may take the form of responding to a page. It may look like doing engineering work to improve the service. It may be reverting a bad deployment. And I think that individual contributors are going to look at these last points and see that they feel empowered to pay down some technical debt that is standing in the way of meeting the service's objectives. Yeah, who has tech debt that's making your services slow? Everyone. Now, if we keep these key gains in mind, we can frame the conversation with our new service owners around these and say, well, these are pretty good reasons to do this extra work. We get all this stuff. Now, if we go back a little further, we can look at the questions or the queue length showed our friends and reframe them a little bit to be more direct. Because what does enough workers mean? What kind of work or problems did they have in mind? Like I said before, they're not bad questions. But if we can tease out the root concerns, start asking more direct questions, we can see if RabbitMQ can even provide the best source of answer, the best source of truth for the answer. We can dig deeper by asking questions like, why is that? And how does that give you a benefit? Keep asking more and more, kind of like a 5 why, to keep getting these service owners to give you what they really care about. Because enough workers means something specific to them, but getting to write it down is the hard part. Remember, we want to convince them that the queue length isn't the best place to be looking for this data, because it's just not the best way. We have to get the root concerns and then find out the best way to answer them. Now, it is hard to come up with a set of generic questions to pose for every service, because by definition, they're all doing separate things, right? If they were all doing the same thing, you just have one service. But there's some that we can generalize on. So let's try out some of these old questions and some new ones and see how they match up with our service owners. What are some ways that we can know when a publisher or consumer isn't working? And like I said, that's an important question, but I want to answer it with another question. Is RabbitMQ the best place to look for answers? As before, an inference can be made by looking at the queue length. But remember that the goal here is to have a more direct indicator. We have this data source, which is the queue messages going in, messages going out. Unlike some senators, we can't explain it. Just because we have a source of data doesn't mean we have to use it, especially since it's low fidelity. It doesn't answer this question very well at all. So I would ask the service owners, what does your health check say about when your publisher or consumers aren't working? Oh, that was a laser. Sorry if I blinded anyone. Another question they ask, what does misuse of our services look like? And again, this is an important question. We all make sure our services are, right? Yeah, Connie saw it. This is an important question to answer. What does misuse of our services look like? But again, one that Rabbit isn't best suited to answer. So let me ask our new service owners, what does service misuse mean to you? How can you use the available data or make new data available in order to detect it? There we go. And I hinted at this one a little earlier. How long should a customer have to wait after signing up to get a welcome email? This is a high-level question, and it's important because the data show that prompt mail delivery drives convergence. Convergence, I'm told, is really important. So I'll trust them. We want to keep our customers waiting the least amount of time, a reasonable amount of time. So it's kind of a good objective to have, right? Minimize customer wait time. But how do we phrase it? How about maybe for a given cohort of customers, we will deliver 99% of their sign-up emails in under 2 minutes from the time they click the button to when the mail is sent off to our partner. We can refer to it as time in queue. I'm going to say that a lot, time in queue. Or how long do messages sit before waiting to be processed? If you focus only on the queue length, we might see a queue with 500,000 messages in it and kind of panic. We might worry, is that bad? 500,000, that seems like a lot. But the number on its own doesn't paint the entire picture. Long doesn't always mean bad. So let's add some context with our new time in queue objective. We look at our timing indicators, and now we can say, yeah, we're doing fine, or nope, we're in violation of our objective. If the messages are being processed within our timing objective, then 500,000 messages isn't so bad, is it? For us, we saw keeping the queue length as close to 0 as possible as a proxy for minimizing customer wait time. By convincing our new service owners, which is still a work in progress, that if we get them to put a time limit on it, then the queue size doesn't matter. 1 million messages, 500,000 messages, are we meeting our objective? That's what cares. That's what matters. Throughput is also closely related, and it can be thought of, we should have the ability to process X messages per minute. Or in other words, once we get a message from RabbitMQ, how long does it take us to do our work on it before sending the mail off? When this drops low, perhaps because our mail provider is having problems, our customer wait time will go up. This is another good objective to keep an eye on. Another good question, how close are we to violating our queue limits? The RabbitMQ service owners, me, might impose some kind of limits on the queue to protect ourselves. This could take the form of raw message count limits or a byte count, how much stuff is in there. And it seems reasonable for consumer services to stay under that limit so that publishing isn't interrupted or the messages aren't just dropped on the floor, which, thanks Rabbit, that's useful. This usage agreement is something that me as a RabbitMQ service owner and the customer, our service owners, should be monitoring and measuring against to make sure we're both, one, you're doing what you say you're going to do, and then they don't lose their customers' data. Now, this target may never be shared externally. And by externally, I mean outside the team. And that's OK. You don't have to share all of your objectives. How might you phrase this one? What's a good target? Maybe no more than 1% of our messages will fail per day for queue violations. OK. It's a good thing you can actually measure against. But what kind of instrumentation could help Rabbit customers be aware of how close they are? As a service owner of RabbitMQ, I can send a reject notification whenever there's a violation. Now, the publisher can look for this message and handle it. Maybe they can retry. Maybe they can log a message. Maybe they can do something else that's meaningful. Also, Ontario. Oops, wrong way. Wait a minute, Lisa, didn't you just suggest queue length? Yeah, I did. But what's the difference between this and before? Well, just now it's being used to answer a specific question. How close are we to violating our limits with the RabbitMQ provider? If it's a violation of this internal target, we know there's a specific reason. We're at risk of violating our contract with this RabbitMQ service provider. And that means we're going to have a potential loss of data for our customers, or a worse customer experience for them by having to retry. With this specific one, there may be additional work to understand why it's alerting now, but with our other objectives in mind, we can have a better picture of the state of our system. OK, now what? Obligatory cat picture, what? We have all of these new questions, and we may have even learned that queue length isn't the best way to find the answers to them. Like this cat, we need to assess the situation before pouncing. Aww. So what things do we need to assess? Okay. What data do you need to answer your question? Does it exist? Your service might need some engineering work to expose those relevant indicators before you can begin to answer your new questions. And that's OK. The code can and should change to get the answers that you need. Just take care not to measure and alert on everything, because you might end up like us. Act 4, historic pitfalls. Let's have a look back at our legacy alerting systems to see how it led us to worry about the queue length in the first place. The approach we had taken to running RabbitMQ was largely a black box. It worked, but we weren't really aware of how to get the best out of it or to know when it became unhealthy. We found that being unaware of or unfamiliar with our tools really made it hard because we didn't know what to look for. When we did have problems, we looked at the queues and saw that they were long, and then made the association that long queue equals bad times. In other words, the long queues were the symptom that forced the patient into the doctor's office. It wasn't the problem, but it brought attention that something was wrong, or may have been wrong. I mentioned the pager fatigue earlier. I remember the days of 2015 and how noisy RabbitMQ was. Every 2.5 days on average for the entire year. Most of them were unactionable. And that really informed how hesitant I was to have the queue length as an objective. I knew there had to be a better way because historically, the thing we thought we cared about didn't help us at all. Our encore. Our SLO journey at FreshBooks started off with our team coming up with the first objectives for RabbitMQ and then sharing them out to get feedback. And we uncovered that we didn't really have a complete picture of what our Rabbit customers expected of us. We worked with them, came up with a new way of thinking, but it took being open to the idea that we might have missed something. We had to be open to having these tough discussions, and believe me, they were tough. But that misalignment really turned into a learning opportunity for everyone. Us as the pilots of this project, and for peers who are coming up with their own objectives, as I hope I've shown. Previously, our developer friends liked the long queue, or the queue length metrics because it was broad and told them a whole range of things that could possibly be going on with their system. But going forward, I hope that when an alert happens, that the responder will be able to quickly digest the possible causes, since it's their team who hopefully will be receiving the alert, and they should be aware of the indicators which led that alert to occur in the first place. So wrapping up, I want to focus on the sentiment. I knew there had to be a better way, since historically, the thing we thought we cared about didn't help. And that's really the key here. We had something that just didn't work for us, and we had to make a change. The catalyst for that change was, for us, the push towards service ownership. Getting from there to here has been a years-long process, years long. And it began with the quiet acceptance of noisy alerts. And then we got to where we are now by conceiving of a new way forward with this kind of kick towards service ownership. We all have a ways to go at FreshBooks before we have SLOs or service owners and all of that. But that means there's going to be more acts in this production. In the prequel, we may have seen our operations heroes struggling with responsibility for services that they don't own and don't have control over. But hopefully there will be a sequel showing a new hope, where we have robust service ownership and a great set of SLOs. Now, I'm confident that we have laid the groundwork to get there. And I'm sure that once the credits roll in our new hope, we'll no longer worry and, in fact, love the queue length. And for folks who want to learn more about SLOs, I invite you to read Google's SRE book, Chapter 4, which is totally free, I swear to God, on Google's SRE website. Thank you all.